Once again, welcome to the webinar today. This is Vineet Mohan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FastTrackr. I'll host the session, but fear not, I have some excellent panelists along with me who will add a lot more value during the session. We've got a great topic today. We're not just talking about AI automation, but also how we can do all of that while staying compliant. Before we get started, as I said, we've had great interest in today's webinar, and it's actually quite a good mix of participants as well. We've got folks who work at RIAs, advisory practices, but also folks who work with advisors and advisory practices. So it might be great to just get started with a few questions, like every good webinar that we've been a part of. We'll start with a poll. We'll have 3 questions as part of the poll. The first one is about what your firm does. The second one, and actually while I say that, if you click the chat window, you must be able to see the poll. So if you open the chat window, you'll see the poll live there. You'll see one of the questions show up, and there's a button, view poll. So if you click that button and respond to each of these 3 questions. The first one is around what you and your firm do. The second one, what's the top operations challenge you see at advisory firms while being in it or while working with them? And thirdly, what's the biggest reason for not adopting AI in your experience? We have given a few options along with every question, but at the same time, if none of the options suit your thinking, then feel free to add them to the chat window as well. And once you've responded to all 3 questions, please do hit the submit button. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds. We've got 6 responses in so far.
Have we got 8?
Yeah.
I think we have set up more difficult options.
We can see them coming in.
Yeah. It's nice.
So
yeah,
75% RIA advisory firms.
Yeah, so far? Okay.
So we're about to reach 30 people in the audience. That's good.
Any change to that stat yet, James?
No, not really. A few more responses, but the stats are holding 67%.
Got it.
But I think
Actually,
this shows, I was just going to say, I think this shows kind of in line. One, what do your firm do? We figured it would mostly be advisory firms, which is perfect because it's primarily targeted at all of you. And, I participated in the survey because I put in what I hear from advisors, but it resonates. It shows that onboarding is the #1 issue. And I think we keep hearing that again and again. Compliance clearly showed up as a high one, along with data gathering and document management and processing. So lots of interesting areas, but I think it really tracks with kind of like what we've all been discussing and seeing in preparation for today's webinar. So this is perfect.
Brilliant.
Oh,
so we
the
haven't
third
been
one.
wrong.
Here, why don't you talk about the third one, Vineet? I didn't tackle that one. The biggest reason for not adopting AI.
And the winner is?
Tie. Don't know where to start and compliance concerns. So
okay, that's actually not very surprising, right? I mean, I think
yeah.
we were aligned with our homework, I think, so far. But listen, we're 5 minutes in. We've got 13 responses so far. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the poll. But I think in the interest of time, maybe we move on and get started with the actual session. All right. Okay, so we'll get into the meat of it. But before we do that, I was keen to just set the agenda a little bit and what we're going to cover today. Obviously, we've all been talking, but we'll do formal introductions right after this. And then next up is setting the scene. We'll talk a little bit about, all of us wonder where that work week just went, especially when you're an advisor and all these things kind of are on your plate. I see Jeff nodding there as I say that. So we'll talk a little bit about the time trap and actually the cost of inaction. And then don't worry, we've got you covered. We'll then give you a way out with an evaluation framework of where to get started to some of the answers that we saw earlier, especially when it comes to AI. And then we'll bring that to life with more than a couple of use cases, actually. We've got both client-oriented and non-client-oriented use cases for you today. So excited to bring that in front of you. And then finally, what if we automated everything and took everything away from our table? What happens to compliance and security? I think that's something that's top of mind. So we've got a neat little checklist that we'll cover today, but also share with you at the end of the session. And obviously, after that, we can head straight into some Q&A as well, based on how much time and how many questions come up. On that note, let's start with introductions. So James, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is James Cantwell. I'm from Wealth Tech Select. I've been in this industry over a quarter of a century, and that makes me feel very old saying it that way. But I've grown up in this industry. I've worked for wealth management firms. I've worked for software firms like SS&C Advent. And I've been a consultant for over a decade now, working independently with firms like all of yours. I really focus on operations and technology. More recently, I've been getting into some software development to build some solutions for RIAs. One is out, a few more are coming. I'll save those for some other time, less promo, more get to know us. And so I love to help advisors with AI, with efficiency, with operations. And I'm excited to talk to you all today.
Thank you, James. And maybe Jeff, you want to go next?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jeff Dunn Bernstein. This year, I broke away and founded Paradise Advisor Group and our main brand, QE Wealth Management. It's focused on the integration of real estate into our traditional wealth management and planning. I also, like James, am kind of enamored with what we can do with AI and software, and we'll also be launching a couple here in the coming months. So excited to be here with such a good panel.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, James. Lovely introductions. Very excited to be on the panel with you. I'm Vineet Mohan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FastTrackr AI. We are an AI stack purpose-built for RIAs and advisory practices. We help take away work from advisory teams that they don't want to do or they shouldn't really be doing in the age of AI. So think of all that work that's error-prone, repetitive, and very much manual. And FastTrackr is a platform that helps you automate or semi-automate some of those workflows. Some examples would be the meeting workflow. Another one would be extraction and processing of different client documents. And the third one would be data gathering as part of client onboarding. But again, to James' point, less promo, more let's talk about what we are on here for. So let's just get the session started. So first up, like I said at the beginning, we call this the time trap. And I'm very sure everyone in the room, this is not the first time you've seen stats like these put up in front of you. I'm sure you've seen many of these reports and studies come up. And frankly, many of these reports and studies haven't changed over the last few years either, right? And what it really says is that a lot of time is spent on activities that are not client facing. So as an advisor, you really want to be spending time in front of clients or prospective clients or generating business. But what ends up happening is up to 2 days of a work week is spent on tasks, which you could almost call admin or back office. Examples could be preparing for a meeting, responding to client queries, analyzing documents, general admin, paperwork, a variety of stuff. And what that means is the time spent in front of clients is actually just 1 day a week, 20% of your time every week, which isn't great if you think about it. And there's 2 ways out of this typically, right? Either you hire, grow your team, delegate some of that work, or you bring in technology, automation, AI. But when it comes to the latter option, at least, one thing that we've seen, told several times is the fear or nervousness around compliance. Now, this might be just based on what you are uncertain about, or just restrictions that are placed on you based on the setup that you are in. And we will tackle some of that today. So moving on, as I mentioned earlier, it's not that people aren't aware of the time trap. Everyone's so buried in it that you're always thinking, okay, when I have some more bandwidth, I'll try and fix this. Or like I said earlier, I'll hire someone and get them to manage some of the stuff. Or I'll actually work with an external consultant, take their help to streamline some of these workflows, document the processes, or even help me, evaluate suitable tools. But what ends up happening is that you end up delaying the decision. And what we tried to show in this slide is that there is a cost to that delay. And it's really up to you. If you put up a simple formula here, what you think might be your hourly rate, basically maybe what you charge or what you make, you multiply that by the number of hours you spend on manual work and on client-facing work a week. And then again, multiply by the number of weeks in the year, and you get a number. We've come up with 125K and 260K based on 2 hourly rates that we picked up. But we've been told it can be a lot higher than that.
Vineet, I was just going to give a quick shout out. We posted this slide on one of the LinkedIn promos for this. And the very first comment was Ben Olson at BMO, who was like, oh, no, man, it's way higher.
Exactly. But there is a way out, right, James? And I think we'll try and kind of show you a little bit about that. And I think it's a good time to hand over the baton to you. Over to you, James.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. So what I want to show you on the next slide is what we're going to cover. And we're going to go through 4 quick slides. And in each of these is essentially what I'll call a pillar that we want to focus on when we're thinking about how to bring AI into your practice. You're likely doing something with it now. You're probably testing with AI in your personal life. Some of you might be doing some more advanced things, already using some industry-specific AI tools. But this is really focused at somebody, or really anybody at any level who's looking at AI. But this is going to be really useful if you're just thinking about using AI in your firm and you're trying to figure out how to go about doing so. And we're covering this a little bit more from, at least in the first pillar, a regulatory check, then from a use case standpoint, and then really from a prioritization, right? And you almost want to think of it more from a goal standpoint as well, because it's really important not just to use AI, it's more important to actually solve a real meaningful problem. And AI is just a tool to get there. So while there's a bunch of things that are in here, what I want to point out right off the bat, and I'm a car guy, so I hear this phrase all the time, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so while it might seem like we're slowing you down with like, oh, let's go through this process and think about it. But if you do it right, you go through this process, then you'll be able to move much faster with your AI adoption. You'll have less compliance concerns, and you'll be able to roll things out faster and get higher utilization out of them. So that's really what we're trying to convey here. So we're trying to simplify things. So let's think about this from a regulatory standpoint. If you're thinking about AI for your firm, and this is a little more guidance than it is true rules, but things kind of fit into 3 nice buckets here. Things that you probably shouldn't be using in your practice, especially with clients in any way, public AI tools, like non-paid public AI tools. If you are using one of those paid plans, one thing that's really important is, while most of them won't train on your information, that's not always the default setting, even on the paid plans. So you want to go look at your settings, even on a paid plan, and make sure everything that might, anything that you can lock down from a privacy standpoint, you do, so that it's a more secure experience. But yeah, anything that's unvetted by your organization, you haven't properly analyzed and used, be very careful with, or frankly, just don't use it at all. Right? Then there's kind of the proceed with caution, high risk, high reward areas, right? So these are tools that you need to vet, but because they're client facing, possibly related to portfolio construction or trading or anything along those lines, sure, they're high reward, but they're also high risk. So this is where due diligence is extremely important. And as we go through the rest of the framework, you'll want to really do your due diligence on these. Lastly are things that are a little bit safer to get started with today. Yeah, so easy things that are already public, right? So let's give a real world example. You're a financial advisor, you do some of your own investment research, great. If you have some documents from a few analysts on, let's say, earnings just came out for NVIDIA yesterday, we probably have some recent analyst updates that'll be coming out soon, and you wanted to take some of those documents that you have, put them into a tool like Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT, etc., ask it some questions to synthesize this information and help you understand it. Perfect use case to use, very simple, compliant, as long as you're using that information for yourself, right? There's not a lot of risk in that. Ideation and brainstorming, not a lot of risk as long as you're not putting in confidential private data. And even be careful with, your firm's secret sauce and other things like that if you're using these public tools. So there's some other things on here, training materials, stuff like that, that can be super helpful. And actually, I probably should talk about training materials really quick, because this is one that I have an actual use case on, and I don't want to get us too far off scope here. But process documentation. One thing that I've done is I've worked with firms to record using, say, Loom or Teams or something like that, a training session. And as long as we're using sample data, we're not showing anything with PII, we can then run that through AI to help create the first draft of a training document. Really great way to build documentation really quickly when you do a training like this for 30 minutes or an hour, and then you turn that into documentation using AI. Just be careful what you're feeding the AI. We can move to the next one, Prad. So pre-implementation checklist. I'm not going to go through all the questions on the screen. You can read it. You'll get the slide deck. But we want to look at any AI tool really through a couple of different filters, or any AI use. Obviously through a regulatory filter, right? Is this tool making use of NPI, confidential information, PII, etc.? Does it have any ability to redact that information? What's its retention policies? What is it impacting within our organization? Like, what decisions are we going to make off of it? What are the ramifications if this information is incorrect? Who's going to be looking this information over? And is this client facing in any way? We have a handout that we'll give out later that goes a little bit deeper into some of the different questions that you can take home with you. But looking things through a regulatory lens is really important. Equally as important, finding the right things to use AI for. So business impact, what are the things that are actually going to save you time? What are the things that are going to free up that time so that you can use it to spend more time with your customers or provide better insights and better use of your time elsewhere? What things will integrate well with what you already have, right? And what's really going to propel your business forward? So really thinking about the impact and not, shiny object system implementing AI for the sake of implementing AI, really thinking about where it can add value, and how to get started. Governance, right? Making sure you still have human oversight. What is it doing, or in terms of record keeping or audit trails? How can you retain that data if it is something that you need to keep? What's it going to be like to train your staff? What sort of approval process for any output exists to verify it before it goes out the door? And then we'll cover it a little bit later, but we'll get into some vendor verification items as well. So this last one that I'm going to cover for this section is really kind of how to get started. We can go to the next slide. The last one I'm going to cover in this section is really helping you prioritize. So what we want to do is, if you look at the stars, these are really the three boxes that we're prioritizing. So the upper right is high impact, low compliance threshold. So I gave some examples before: public data research, internal process automation, but again, be careful with like what data it's accessing. Marketing content generation. We're going to give an example of that a little bit later that Jeff's going to present, right? And any sort of analysis of documents or data that has non-NPI information. Great, easy use to use AI in your practice today. Now, if you move over to the left, the plan carefully for phase 2, these things are high impact, high compliance. So these are where you're going to want to do greater due diligence. Things have to really go through a governance process. And that's your AI meeting tools, anything that's going to be document processing related to onboarding, integrating these tools with your CRM or an AI built into a CRM or other platform, portfolio analysis, portfolio construction tools, things like that. Going to the lower right, quick experiments. Again, these are things that you can do relatively easily. They just may not have as big of an impact on your time. You can use, if you're a Microsoft shop, you can already use Copilot to help you draft emails, right? Otherwise, you can use other tools. There's plenty of calendar optimization tools out there that are AI driven. Those are generally a little bit easier to get through a compliance process and something that you can stand up, in a day. Really only takes a couple of minutes beyond compliance. And then the lower left is things that you should really probably avoid, things that are really complex that aren't going to yield a lot of efficiencies, things that are high risk automation, maybe touching really critical processes, not a good place to start. Any area that's highly regulated and isn't going to yield big gains, right? So this is not rocket science. It's really just a framework for thinking about where is AI going to provide the biggest dividends, and use this as a framework to figure out, like, where should I get started using AI in my business if you're really interested in how to start leveraging this new tool.
All right, thanks, James. That was brilliant. And actually, it's a great segue as well. If you looked at the previous slide, the top two boxes is what we'll try and cover next. And also the bit about, I think, where you spoke about business impact, right, when it comes to use cases. Again, I think this will kind of really fold well into the next segment of our session today. So I'll walk you all through a few use cases. Pretty much at the beginning of the webinar, we were talking about how client meetings are extremely important, and where most people want to spend most of the time. Engage with clients, with prospects, and add value, learn about them, etc. But what you don't realize is that you end up spending a lot of time around meetings, before a meeting, in terms of preparing for the meeting, typing the meeting notes, but then also post-meeting follow-ups. And this is an area where we've seen a lot of early adoption. I think we can almost say at this point that it's gone beyond early adoption. So I will now share my screen. So a meeting assistant like FastTrackr, in this case, it will automatically integrate with your tech stack. So in this case, your email and your calendar. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So on the right-hand side, you can see that it's already fetched all your upcoming and past meetings from your calendar. Now, if I were to meet a prospective client, John, before the meeting, this is the first time meeting John, so we don't really have any information on John, except an email that I sent him. The meeting prep itself is just information from that email. But what happens post the meeting, when I haven't had to type out any manual meeting notes, is post the meeting, I get a very detailed and nuanced summary of that meeting. The first section kind of gives you an overview. The next section kind of breaks it down further into personal details, which every advisor is interested in knowing about the client, their household, their circumstances, but also some of the specific themes that they're very interested in talking to you about. So any kind of meeting assistant will go into these level of details, and then also capture data points that are of tremendous interest to you. It also then potentially captures action items from the meeting in terms of what happens next, and also assists you with some of the follow-ups post a meeting. So if you think about, one of the first things that most people would like to do the very next day after a meeting is to send an email to the person that you spoke to. So you could have something like this drafted up for you, where it gives a very good kind of description of the meeting summary in terms of what some of the thematic topics were, but also kind of talks about some of the immediate next steps that came up from the meeting. And it also captures some of the interesting personal details, right? So for example, in this particular meeting, there was a mention of an upcoming milestone birthday. But again, I think to James' point earlier, these should not be sent to a client. This kind of comes in that high risk, high reward kind of bucket. So this is something that should be for an advisor's review before he or she then presses the send button. Along the same lines, a meeting assistant can also sync with your tech stack, in this case, your CRM. In my case here, it's Webbox, where John Doe, my prospective client, is already in Webbox. And now I've got these detailed meeting notes and the action items, which go into a lot of detail, as much as you want. And then you can push that with a single click into your CRM. The interesting thing is, the next time you meet John, and before the meeting, today when advisors spend a lot of time preparing for the meeting, with a meeting assistant that's already integrated with some of your tech stack, you'd have a very good client profile available to you before the meeting. So in this case, it has now picked up a neat little summary of the prior interaction, which wasn't there, if you remember, the first time we looked at it. And it also then captures insights from emails. And if we had information on this client in other tools, for example, financial planning tools or client folders, and those integrations were available, then you would have that information as well. So, this is a great use case. We've seen it being adopted all the way from Morgan Stanleys of the world to smaller RIAs across the spectrum. But having said that, this is still very much the first iteration of the meeting assistant. And why I say that is that the meeting assistant is a great entry point for other expansive use cases. And I'm going to just show you how that works. So imagine after my first meeting with John, I also then get an alert on the platform that says that a new client record, a master client record, has been created. And then I click that, which takes me into this neat little form that gets populated every time I meet John. So imagine this is a record that captures data points that could go into your CRM, your financial planning tool, or even your account opening documents. And say you and John have met 3-4 times before you shake hands and decide to work with each other. You don't really want to send John a blank customer information form at that point in time. The beauty of AI is that, since it has participated in each of the meetings prior, it can have actually populated a lot of that data already, like in this case. So here you'll see, the professional information is captured, some of the relationship information. It even captures items like phone numbers, etc., whatever was mentioned in the conversation. And a great example here of syncing it with your tech stack would be to then try and push that to your CRM string. And here when I, hit push to CRM, it immediately does a quick match with your CRM and tells you, hey, I've got new information about John Doe. Or it might tell you, I've got new information which conflicts with the information you have in your CRM or your financial planning tool or whatever it might be. And all you would need to do is pick which version you like and update it. And then automatically your CRM gets synced with all this new and update enriched information. You could also then use it to share with your client. A lot of advisors don't want to start onboarding until their clients have validated or completed the information that they have on file. So you could do that as well. So hopefully this brings to life the first kind of use case of how we went from a meeting assistant and how slowly the industry is moving towards other expansive use cases like data gathering and onboarding. The other use case that I wanted to talk to you about was, oftentimes, and it's a great example when we talk about prospects, actually, is before you have the entire financial information about a client, you're also often having to work with a bunch of electronic documents that you get from the client. These could be brokerage statements, these could be tax forms, or it could be as niche or nuanced as when you're working with a tech professional who has all these complicated equity grant letters, and you want to analyze that against a stock plan and get a summary of what some of the conditions are presented back to the client and so on and so forth. A good document processing engine can go to extreme levels of detail and save you a lot of hours in bringing that forward. To demonstrate this use case, I'll take the same client and I will take the example of a couple of brokerage statements. Imagine John and his wife have their accounts with Fidelity and Schwab. And you get these documents over email or a secure link, and you upload them here. Normally, I think advisors or their teams spend hours trying to extract information from these documents. All you would need to do with an AI platform or processing engine is you would upload it. And this can take a minute or two. So in the interest of time, I will actually show you a copy of a proposal that gets generated with the documents that I had uploaded. So bear with me while I share my screen again. Yeah. Can you see the spreadsheet? Okay, perfect. So as I shared earlier, we had uploaded a Fidelity statement and also a Schwab statement. So the first two tabs go into all of those details in that statement, right? So we've prompted the AI here to look up those statements, and these statements can be very, as you all know, every provider, every custodian has a different format. But you can, train the AI, prompt it to pick out very specific details like what are the underlying holdings, what are the tickers associated with it, what is the quantity, price, asset, etc. And either based on information in the statement or based on data from Morningstar, Google Finance, etc., you can also start assigning categories to each of those holdings. Just like we did with the Fidelity statement, we've done a similar kind of analysis of the Schwab statement, where you see very similar output. And then we can go a step further, where we can then amalgamate these two statements and present a household level view to a client. So in this case, we see John and Dana, their accounts have been combined at a household level. Their net worth is close to 3.6 million. And then we're also able to use the asset categorization to produce a portfolio composition or split in terms of how it's split across equity, fixed income, and other asset classes. The beauty of this is now the advisor can sit down and look at, okay, does that asset mix look appropriate when based on their profile, the risk thresholds, etc. And it also can do other deeper analysis, like do they have concentrations within equity in specific sectors, US versus non-US, etc. So depending on whatever analysis areas that a particular advisor or advisory team likes to look at, the AI can go into that level of detail and kind of map out not just what is there in the statement, but also using solid external data like Morningstar to present those reports. Coming back to our slide, so those are the two use cases. Meeting assistant. Then I spoke about data gathering, and then I also spoke about document processing. But having said that, that is just the start, right? There are several other use cases within the client data space itself, which can be tackled with AI. But to James' point, proceed carefully. Make sure you're working with the right tools, the right people, right platforms, and do your vetting, and we'll help you with that. And not too distant future, you can also start looking at AI tools and platforms potentially as an extension of your team that picks up a lot of this work, so that the team can start looking at spending more time with clients or business generating activities. But I'll pause there and I'll hand it over to Jeff to cover a few other use cases that are non-client oriented. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Vineet. So also maybe right now is a good time to put out there if people start to have questions, maybe throw them in the Q&A, and then we can start to take a look at those and address them either as they come up or at the end. So everything that we are going to talk about here briefly is going to fall in that low risk, high reward that James pointed out. I would get the really low lying fruit and keeping it safe. This is also the stuff, though, that I think that it's really clear that you can take from this today. You can go right after we get off of this webinar and start to play with these things. As a good illustration of that, this was the homework that I was assigned. And literally while we were on the call talking through kind of what my process was going to be, in my case using Gemini, James decided that he was just going to punch it in off screen so that when we got off the call, like less than 10 minutes later, it was all done. Right. So he sent it to me and then basically just said, what do you think of this? And so I wasn't going to use myself as an example, but it was flattering and I got to see what it looks like from the Perplexity side of things. Both of us use the paid versions. We do not use the public versions of anything that we use. But I think it's a really good illustration of just how fast this can be done. We can probably pop to the slide. So what we've included here is essentially the prompts that James used, right? And we'll walk through how you can use something similar or just take these, change the name. We did not end up including the responses. I think we could have definitely done that, walk through it, but I think you'll be given these prompts essentially at the end of this to take away. And I think it's a lot more impactful for you to just start using the tool if you haven't already. Punch these in, follow the process, and just watch it work, right? Watch the responses come up. That's going to be a lot more fun than me talking through them. So that being said, I think that we can dive into what essentially we're starting with. We're asking, in this case, Perplexity, in my case, usually Gemini, we're just having an open conversation with AI about what we actually want this to do, right? So we want you to go, we want you to visit this website for us as an advisor group. We want you to examine where we're strong, where we're weak, maybe the edge we have, maybe our niche focus, our location, and that this is going to be used in service of creating a marketing campaign, right? And in this case, it's focused on LinkedIn. So we give that prompt, we watch it work. It comes up with some really amazing, really accurate information about our niche, tells me, what the upper hand advantages that we have over a lot of other advisor groups, gives me a little ego boost, and it's going to bring back a plan, right? So then we get this, we get all of this data, and then we request that it puts that into a strategic plan, in this case with LinkedIn. We tell it, hey, we want marketing plan for the next 30 days, focusing on these strengths. What do you think, right? It brings us back something probably pretty exciting. We'd all be thrilled to be able to post it. Compliance isn't going to let us, right? It's just a little too fun, a little too intriguing. So then we have to do the job of having it go through and request kind of a compliance review, right? So in step 4, we need to tone it down a little bit, right? We need to have it review a couple FINRA rules, some SEC marketing rules, fiduciary duty. All these things are publicly available. The AI can walk through that. It can tone it down, right? It can check for, promissory language. It can check for maybe, our potential to include visuals that are maybe a little bit too exciting. And then when we get it back, it's going to be a little bit more dumbed down. It's going to be a little bit more compliance friendly. And then it's our job to make sure that we ask the AI to maintain all of that compliance that we just did, but maybe then kind of spice it back up just to grab some attention, right? While still maintaining the compliance. And that's what we have in step 5. And I think it's a really exciting, it's really fun to watch, especially if you haven't done it before, getting a good prompt, putting it in, watching it work, seeing what it spits out, and then being able to just walk through, give it the next prompt, and then just watching it work and iterate on this process.
Jeff, can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah, please.
If just to comment on like the watching it work. So like I did this one with Perplexity, and what's kind of cool is, and most of them do this, but like what's kind of cool is you do see it work. You see the sources that it's going through. Mm-hmm. Perplexity has a nice section where you can click steps, and then it actually, after it's done working, because sometimes it can move fast, you can actually go in and see each and every resource, its comments to itself on what it's doing. And so it helps you like go back and look and be like, yeah, those are good resources to use. Those are trusting resources, right? It did use my website, whatever. So if you want to validate anything, or if you're questioning any of the information, or you're just curious how it works, looking at the steps can be really helpful. And then there's also a sources tab where it'll show you every source that it actually used and cited.
Yeah, and it's all annotated, right? Like it shows you where each piece of information came from all the way through, which I think is really, I think like we clip that those little markers out of there. But yeah, I think it's really exciting, and how much work it actually goes through is pretty astounding.
Yeah. I'll just add, if somebody's doing something like this, I think Perplexity is a great place to do like the research portion. And I think I like to take the output and often use Claude, because Claude can create artifacts and format things better. It can create visuals, things like that. ChatGPT can do some similar stuff. So Perplexity is more of like my research and, thinking partner, especially because it can still use Claude models and other models, and then take it to another tool to maybe refine the look and feel.
Yep.
Don't change the content unless you're doing other compliance checks.
Right. And then, yeah, and then I think Midjourney is pretty fun for the visuals. So I mean, like, we all have our, like, there's so much that we can play with and so many different ways we can go with it. But I think just starting and being maybe mildly amazed at just watching it work the first time, I think we wanted to leave that excitement and joy for you guys to do on your own here. So Vineet, I think maybe we can go to the next slide. So here we have kind of the end output, right? So this breaks down kind of how we're going to tackle something, what we're going to put out, why we're looking at it, right? Good and bad. This is just a good simple output after all of that information has gone in. We've done the compliance check. We've maybe tried to spice it up a little bit more. And you can see that here in this example. Then next. So while we did use this, right, as a non-client facing, no MPI example, some of the other things that we can do aside from kind of creating the fun marketing pre-compliance check, always need to get it checked by compliance, right? Some of the other things that we can use a really similar research process like this for, right? We listed some of the tools, right? Perplexity, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. Some of the other things that you can use a very similar process for is demographic research, investment research potentially, right? James brought that up earlier as a good example. Lead generation, part of that is included in what we were looking at on LinkedIn, who to target, right? How much to spend. SEO for a website, right? Some of us may want to hire for that. Some of us may want to take the information that would be used on SEO, but just see what we look like to the internet, right? What does our site look like? What are we putting out there? How are we viewed? And then you can decide if some of that needs to be incorporated actually into your website itself. And then also the website building itself, right? A lot of these tools, you can use them to create not only content, but images, layout, and everything else. So I think that there's a lot of really low-hanging fruit that doesn't have a lot of risk and has a pretty good return on it. And all of this then that we did today and showed today was run through with James's pre-implementation checklist in mind. And then I think now that you have an idea of some of the stuff that we can do, some of the stuff that's really attainable and easy to start as soon as we get off this meeting, James will be able to follow up on how to utilize the compliance checklist and how some of that feeds back into what we just looked at.
Hey, Jeff, before we cut back over, can you talk a little bit about the AI document you created for your own firm about basically the guardrails, the acceptable use cases for using AI in your firm, and just kind of your thoughts on what a firm should do in creating a document like that?
Yeah, so John O'Connell needs to get full credit for that. He kind of just kept beating it into me, and I think everyone else he talks to, about how important it is to now create an AI use case document that we need to kind of follow and adhere to, something that we can show clients, that we can show other advisors, regulators. And so I finally did that, and I used AI to create my AI use case, right? I had it pull a ton of research from every place I could think of. I asked it to review the CFP site and FINRA and SEC, and right, like we just went every little thing that we could think of, pull white papers, legal opinions, right, everything. And it organized it beautifully. And, then we went in and cleaned it up a little bit. Vineet had some really good input the other day on it, like, hey, maybe you can get rid of the SEC, maybe you can get rid of FINRA, you're SEC, right? So we went through and cleaned it up, but it gave us just so much. It built just such a solid thing where I was starting originally with a blank white piece of paper, right? And that wasn't going to work. So I think even that, and are we including that, or we can maybe send it out if somebody wants like a place.
I mean, we have it if you want to send it out.
Yeah. So I mean, it's generic, so it's at least a good place to start. But then go through, figure out what you want to do, how are you using AI, how you think about using AI. It may be good food for thought, right? Some of that stuff in there after this webinar, taking into account all of the stuff that James and Vineet said. Maybe how do you guys actually want to use it?
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we've a lot of interesting use cases and starting points from those use cases, Jeff. And coming back, I think one of the equally important topics besides AI use cases, the compliance checklist. Over to you, James.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this, and just to kind of point this out, this last section, along with a lot of this presentation, we're sending you home with more in-depth documents that cover these things and additional questions. But as we go to the next slide, Prad, what we have on the next two slides are basically an 8-point checklist that we've kind of simplified on areas that you want to focus on when evaluating AI vendors or AI use within your firm. Having an acceptable use policy, like Jeff just explained, and will provide to the attendees of this meeting as well, is a really valuable thing to have from a compliance standpoint, and really just so that you can have good, clear communication and guidelines to the employees at your firm and the other members of your firm on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable use of AI. Even right now, if you're not planning on using AI, an AI acceptable use policy makes sense, probably stating that. So one way or another, you should probably have a document like this or an acceptable use policy that incorporates some thoughts on AI. So we put together this 8-point checklist. Some of the areas that you want to focus on: data security and isolation, right? So making sure the vendor is isolating your data, making sure that it is encrypted. One of the things that can be really important is, from an SEC standpoint, if there's any sort of breach, you have 30 days to notify your clients. So you need to know what the timeline is for your vendor to notify you, so that you're not in breach if your vendor were to have a data breach. Which is a pretty worst case scenario, but it's something that we have to be ready for. Data ownership. So where's this data stored? What happens if this vendor goes out of business? What happens if I change vendors? Can I get a hold of this data? What's the retention policies on it? Do I have any control of these retention policies? All things to think about. One that I think most people know about and have probably heard a lot is training of AI models. I mentioned this earlier today. You want to make sure your vendors are not using your data to train on it. And that's definitely an area you want to cover. Security monitoring. So does the vendor have 24/7, cyber threat protection? Are they doing regular penetration testing? Are they doing updates to their environment regularly to patch it and make sure everything is as bulletproof as it can from a cybersecurity standpoint, right? You'll want to know all these things about these vendors. And frankly, this is not very different than any other vendor evaluation. That's probably one thing that I should talk about. There are some nuances because of what you're doing, but you're already using most likely a CRM that's sending PII to the cloud and storing it up there, right? So it's not all that different of an evaluation process. And I think that's something that a lot of firms haven't gotten in that mindset yet. They look at AI as some sort of black box and treat it differently than Office 365, than their CRM that's in the cloud, than their cloud-based trading and rebalancing platform. You're already using all these things in the cloud. This is the same type of verification you're doing for a lot of things. Number 5 here is probably a little more nuanced: AI accuracy and verification. So how good is the output, right? And that's partially going to depend on how good is your input. But you want to make sure that, especially if anything's client facing, you're using it for advice, portfolio construction, some of those areas, that you're getting really accurate information. And again, that's why it always comes back to having a human in the loop, having that governance process. Record keeping, does your platform save these conversations for compliance purposes? Do you need to save various items for compliance purposes? How are you getting that data? Where are you storing it? Those are things that you have to think about. A really important one that I work with firms on all the time, how compatible is it with the rest of your technology stack? A conversation probably for another time, but I think the AI tools that sit over your tech stack and can talk with everything while riskier to implement provide a lot more value. So tools like FastTrackr that can work with your CRM, that can do the document ingestion, that can be a part of client meetings, have more context, more valuable and better use cases, right? They can do that high impact, high value type of functions. And then what security or audit certifications do they have? Do they adhere to GDPR? Are they SOC 2? Have they gone through a SOC 2 Type 2? Do they have any ISO certifications? All really important things to cover. And again, not drastically different than what you're doing for any of your other vendors. Few nuances around the AI piece, but this is largely what you're doing already. So with that, I think we can go to the next slide.
Right. Thank you, James. Please do send any questions please do post them in the chat window. We still have a few minutes left. But I think the compliance checklist and and those 8 points, James, will be very handy because I've had several conversations with advisors and firms who often don't know where to start or don't know what questions to ask as well. And I think something like this kind of could be a great starting point as a guiding document, if not the only comprehensive document, I would say.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we have one question here. It says, I'm already using several tech systems. Won't AI tools add to the clutter? I think it's a great question. I can start, and Jeff, James, feel free to chip in. I think it's a very interesting question because I think when the map 5 years back had maybe 150 firms on it. Now it's got 400, 500 firms on it. So yes, there are a large number of tech tools out there, and I think literally every RIA or advisory firm is working with at least 4 or 5 of these tools. So when you look at it like that, yes, it may add something in the beginning. But I think one thing that kind of stands out with AI tools, at least, is that up until now, largely the systems that you had didn't really talk to each other. And today, AI is at a meaningful place where it can be that connector, which you've been missing. Until today, there's been a human connector. And maybe AI can start connecting the dots better. Now, if you think about the meeting assistant as an example itself, you had the meeting and then you spend a whole bunch of time updating the CRM after the meeting or looking at the CRM before the meeting. Now, even though you've added a meeting assistant to your toolkit, your interaction with the CRM in terms of data entry and lookups will go down significantly. So it will still save you a lot of time. So in some ways, it will kind of balance out the time spent. And secondly, I feel perhaps you should also not look at AI as point solutions. I think there will be several players out there who will come and have complementary use cases as well, which might help reduce that clutter. But that's my version. I don't know, James or Jeff, you guys wanted to add something to that?
I'd love to chime in. Will it add clutter? If I answer that question, treating it very black and white, I mean, the answer is yes, it's one more. But the reality is, it's kind of what Vineet said, which is that you're getting a lot more value from it, right? So it's a high value addition, and that's what's more important. I think we're going through a transition phase where there's a lot of firms who, and I'll take it back a little farther. There was a point in time where I think all-in-ones were really popular. And it was the norm, and building your own sort of tech stack with different point solutions was a challenge, especially for smaller firms. Over the years, it became easy and dangerously easy to build a tech stack out of a number of different point solutions, which created this clutter. Now, if those point solutions integrate tightly and really serve you in the way you need to service your clients, then that's great. But most times they don't. They're not communicating well. The data is siloed. And right now, layering an AI tool on top largely resolves that issue, right? It allows that data to be used in context from a number of different sources and then provide the output that you need. So I think we're going through a period where any sort of AI on top is really useful. And I think what we're going to move back to is some all-in-ones that are very AI forward, right? So there's a number of platforms coming out that are, you would call them AI CRMs, but they're note-taking, they're meeting, they're a host of different things, well beyond just a CRM. And I think that's probably the future where you're going to see a lot more functionality baked in to a single platform.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think as an advisor, I totally understand, right? We're bombarded with tech constantly, and even being someone that really loves tech and is excited about it, I think picking up a new planning software, a new CRM, like that can be a really heavy lift. I think my experience with AI is spending $20, $30 a month. It's super low cost, and I immediately see a result, and its interaction and it's the learning of it is fun. Right? So when instead of having to spend 20 hours trying to figure out a new planning software, you give it your card, you pay it $20, and immediately you start seeing how it can create images for your brand or research your brand. And you immediately realize you just saved 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, right? I did my own SEO the other day. And while I will have a professional come back and go over the top of it, I probably saved in a day $20,000 worth of SEO. Right? So you can see it immediately, and it's not a big lift, right?
Thanks both. I think we have time for maybe one other question. There's another one that's come in. What is the accuracy of the document extraction, and can it read handwritten notes? I think I would start by saying it will depend on the quality of the handwriting. But listen, in our own experience as well, I think processing and extraction of documents is not as easy as some of the other use cases. It does take a lot of iterations, because what happens, even if you look at brokerage statements, for example, they're all formatted differently. The form, if you look at a Vanguard versus a Schwab or a Fidelity, where the text lies, where the tables lie, are all different. So you have to train the AI models to kind of understand where to find the appropriate content, and then not just do that, but also do semantic mapping. But with enough kind of quality and assurance testing and iterations, we believe that document processing has come to a point now where it can be very, very accurate. When it comes to handwritten notes, again, not as easy as the printed notes, but again, if it's legible, if it's clearly written, again, it can be quite close to accurate, I would say. But again, it would depend on the quality of the writing as well. I know, James, you're smiling. Did you have something to add?
I was just gonna say, like, I think one thing that people have to keep in mind when they think about automating something is they're often thinking it needs to be perfect and error-free. And the reality is, like, humans aren't, right? So if you're hand typing numbers off of a statement, things are going to get keyed wrong, right? If you're reading something that's handwritten and it's hard to read, you may also transpose letters or numbers or things like that, or get something wrong. So don't think about perfect, right? Think about the value you're getting, and think about the impact if something's wrong, and how easy can you detect it, and what is the potential impact of it, right? Those are the things to think about when you have concerns about using automation or AI when you're transforming data or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Have we reached the end, Vineet? Or do we have another question? I think we're at time.
Perfect.
I think Vineet got stuck here.
You got stuck right at the end? Oh no. Well, I'll chime in. Thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate. Looks like pretty much everybody hung out to the end. So thank you. You'll get a number of documents from the three of us, or from the four of us, excuse me, that we worked on to put together, and we hope you find valuable. And thanks so much for attending.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, James. Thank you, Prad, Vineet. It's great
Thank
to
you,
see you guys.
everyone. I don't think Vineet is here to hear us, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today. And please do check out your email. We'll send out the compliance checklist and the prompt template shortly. And do check out your spam in case it goes over there, because these days I can't trust the email checking of Google as well as Outlook. So please have a look at it and see you again soon then. Bye-bye.